The concert hall was full of people that day. Families, students, teachers, and judges all sat in their seats waiting for the piano competition to begin. It wasn't just any small event. This was one of the biggest competitions of the year. Only the best young pianists had been invited to perform. The hall was grand, with a high ceiling, shining lights, and a beautiful black grand piano placed right in the center of the stage. The sound of quiet talking filled the room as people looked through the program list and whispered about who they thought would win. Backstage were many young performers, all dressed nicely, some nervous and some confident. One of them was a tall boy who was known for his skill. People said he could play the most difficult pieces with ease. He walked around like he already knew he was going to win. Some of the other players admired him, while others felt nervous around him. Then, quietly, someone entered through the side door. A girl with dark glasses and a white cane held her mother's hand as she slowly made her way inside. She moved carefully, listening to the sounds around her. She didn't speak much, just nodded when someone offered her a chair. Most of the people backstage looked at her with surprise. Some of them whispered, wondering if she was really there to compete. One boy even asked another in a low voice, "She's blind. How is she going to play?" The tall boy, the confident one, noticed her too. He watched her as she gently touched the edge of a piano with her fingers, trying to understand its shape. He raised an eyebrow and laughed to himself. "Maybe she thinks this is just a listening competition," he said loud enough for a few others to hear. A few chuckled, but some looked uncomfortable. They didn't think it was right to mock someone, especially someone so calm and quiet. The blind girl said nothing. She simply sat beside her mother and waited. Her hands rested in her lap, calm, and still was something peaceful about her, like she wasn't trying to prove anything. She wasn't angry. She wasn't nervous. She was just ready. One of the staff members came by to check names and make sure everyone was there. When he reached her, he asked kindly, "Are you here for the competition?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm contestant number 17. He smiled and checked her name off the list. "We'll call you when it's your turn. Good luck." The proud pianist rolled his eyes and whispered, "She'd need more than luck." Still, the blind girl didn't respond. Her mother leaned close and whispered something in her ear. The girl smiled gently and nodded. No one knew what was said, but whatever it was, it gave her a peaceful strength that was hard to ignore. As the minutes passed, more people arrived. The hall was nearly full. The host walked on stage, welcomed everyone, and explained the rules. Each contestant would have only a few minutes to perform their chosen piece. Judges would be scoring on skill, emotion, and originality. Backstage, the young performers began warming up. Some practiced their finger movements in the air. Some closed their eyes to calm themselves. The blind girl simply listened. She tilted her head slightly, hearing every sound, every note someone played on a nearby piano. It was like her ears were her eyes. The confident boy looked at her one last time and shook his head with a small laugh. He still didn't believe she could do anything on stage, but little did he know. The girl who sat quietly with her hands folded, the girl who couldn't see the piano keys, would soon make the entire hall go silent with nothing but the sound of her music. The blind girl sat quietly near the backstage corner, gently holding her white cane across her lap. The other contestants were busy chatting, stretching their fingers, or practicing soft notes on a small upright piano nearby. But she didn't move much. She just listened. She tilted her head slightly when someone played a scale. She nodded as if she understood everything without needing to see. Her hands remained calm, her back straight. She looked peaceful, like she had already accepted whatever was going to happen. But not everyone saw her that way. The proud pianist, the one everyone said might win, noticed her again. He stood near a few other players, smirking as he watched her. He whispered something to the group, and they chuckled. Then he said in a louder voice, "So, is she going to play the piano with her ears?" A few of the nearby contestants laughed again, though some looked down, unsure how to respond. The blind girl heard him, of course. She turned her head slightly in his direction but didn't say anything. Her mother, sitting close by, gently squeezed Her hand, she simply whispered, "It's all right. Let your music speak." The proud pianist wasn't done yet. Walked a little closer, pretending to stretch his arms, but loud enough for people around to hear. He added, "Maybe they'll let her feel the keys until she guesses the song." That made some people uncomfortable. A girl standing nearby gave him a sharp look, but said nothing. No one stood up for the blind girl. It was like people didn't know what to say or how to stop him. They just looked away. Still, the blind girl remained calm. She had heard people make jokes like this before, some even worse. But she had learned a long time ago not to let their words enter her heart. Music had always been her world, a world where vision didn't matter, only feeling. She slowly stood up and walked toward the piano placed backstage for warm-ups. Her fingers reached out and found the edge, then slowly traced the shape of the keys. She didn't press down yet. She was simply familiarizing herself with it. She could tell the keys were slightly colder than usual. Maybe the air conditioning was strong. She smiled softly. The proud pianist crossed his arms and watched. "Look at that," he said. "Maybe she thinks touching it will help her play better." He laughed again, this time louder, hoping others would join. A few laughed nervously, not wanting to be rude, but also not brave enough to stop him. The blind girl took a step back from the piano. Her mother came over and held her arm. "You don't have to prove anything," her mother said. "Just be yourself." "I'm not here for them," the girl said softly. "Came to play." She sat back down in her chair and folded her hands in her lap again. The noise around her grew as more contestants arrived, but she stayed still, listening. A man in a black suit walked in with a clipboard and started calling names for practice slots. He called the proud pianist's name. The boy smiled proudly and stepped forward as he walked past the blind girl. He leaned slightly toward her and said, "Better find a new hobby. This one needs eyes." The words hung in the air like something heavy, but the blind girl didn't flinch. She turned her face up toward the sound of his voice and said quietly, "Music isn't played with eyes. It's played with the heart." He didn't reply. He just shook his head and went to the warm-up piano. Little did he know, the very girl he had mocked would soon sit on that stage in front of hundreds, and when she did, not a single person would speak. Not because she asked for silence, but because her music would demand it. The hours passed slowly as the competition moved forward. Contestants were called one by one to play their chosen pieces on the grand stage. Some played fast, full of energy. Others played slow, full of emotion. The audience clapped politely after each performance, but everyone could feel that something was missing. No one had truly touched the heart of the crowd yet. Backstage, the blind girl stayed quiet. She didn't talk much. She didn't ask anyone for help or attention. She simply waited. But those who noticed her couldn't help but wonder how. Was she going to perform if she couldn't see the keys or the conductor's signals? A few whispered again, "Maybe she'll just play a simple tune, nothing special." But someone nearby who had done a little research said, "Actually, I heard she's been playing since she was a child. She lost her vision when she was 7. This caught the attention of a few more people. Another contestant asked quietly, "Then how did she learn music again?" The person replied, "She didn't stop. She learned to play by listening. Her teacher was blind too. He taught her to feel the music, not just memorize it. She hears something once and remembers it completely. They say she plays like she's painting with sound." That sentence stayed in the minds of a few people. The proud pianist, hearing the talk, laughed again. "Painting with sound. That's cute. But this is a real competition, not a talent show." Still, the blind girl sat silently. She didn't react to any of the words around her. She seemed to be in her own little world, a world full of sound, feeling, and memory. Every once in a while, she would lift her hands slowly and move her fingers in the air like she was touching invisible piano keys. She wasn't practicing. She was remembering. The shape of the song, the timing of the notes, the weight of the keys under her fingers, all of it lived in her memory like a clear picture. Her mother sat close, gently rubbing her back now and then. "You've played this piece 100 times," she whispered. "You know it better than anyone." The girl nodded softly. "I don't need to see the piano. I can feel the music inside." What many people didn't know was how hard she had worked to reach this day. Every morning, she would wake up early and sit at her old piano. No lights, no sheet music, no distractions, just her and the sound. She had learned to listen so deeply that even the smallest mistakes were clear to her. She didn't need to see. She could hear everything her teacher once told her. Most people play what they read. But you play what you feel. That's rare. She had never forgotten that. Back in the hall, more contestants were called. The proud pianist finally went up. He played a very fast and difficult piece, showing off his finger speed and perfect timing. The crowd clapped loudly. He smiled proudly and gave a small bow before walking off stage. Backstage, he looked even more confident than before. "I dare anyone to top that," he said, not hiding his pride. Soon, the man with the clipboard returned. He looked around and called the next name. It was her turn. The blind girl stood up slowly. Her mother gave her a final hug and whispered, "I'll be right here. Just listen and play." With her white cane in one hand and quiet courage in her heart, she walked carefully toward the stage entrance. The proud pianist watched her go, still smiling. He had no idea what was about to happen. She wasn't just going to play the piano. She was going to stop time. The large concert hall was quiet now. The proud pianist had just finished his performance, and people were still clapping when the announcer walked back on stage. He raised his hand for silence and looked at the next name on his list. "And now, our next performer," he said, "contestant number 17. A few people looked around, wondering who it was. The backstage curtain moved slightly, and then the blind girl stepped forward. She held her cane in one hand and walked slowly across the wooden floor. A helper from the event gently guided her to the piano. She nodded in thanks and sat down on the bench. Her cane was placed carefully by her side at first. There was silence in the room, not the kind of silence that comes from boredom, but a different kind, a curious one. Some people leaned forward in their seats. Others looked at each other, unsure what to expect. Few had doubtful looks on their faces. One person whispered, "Is she really going to play?" The judges straightened in their seats. One of them raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The proud pianist, now sitting in the audience, crossed his arms and waited with a smirk. The blind girl sat still for a few seconds. She didn't rush. She gently placed her hands on the keys and rested her fingers there. Her eyes hidden behind dark glasses didn't move. She took a deep breath, and then she began. The first few notes were soft, almost like a whisper. They floated through the room gently, like a breeze brushing across still water. People leaned in closer. The sound was slow, warm, full of feeling. Then something happened. The music changed. It grew deeper, richer, and more powerful. Her fingers moved across the keys like they had a story to tell, a real story. A story that didn't need words, or pictures, just sound. Some people closed their eyes to feel it better. Others stared at her hands, watching how smoothly they moved. She didn't look at the keys once. She didn't need to. The judges didn't write anything for a moment. They just listened. One of them even dropped his pen without noticing. Hall, which had been full of coughs, whispers, and shuffling feet earlier, was now completely still. No one dared to move. It was as if the music had wrapped around the whole room. Holding it in place, every note she played felt like it came from deep inside her, like it carried all the feelings. She couldn't speak. Sadness, joy, strength. Love it was more than music. It was like hearing someone's heart out loud. The proud pianist's smile faded. He sat up straighter, no longer laughing. His fingers twitched a little, but not from pride this time. It was something else, something he couldn't explain. The girl continued to play, her body swaying gently with the rhythm. Her timing was perfect. Her sound was full. There was no sheet music, no conductor, no partner, just her. Alone, yet not alone. For a few minutes, time felt like it had stopped. And then, with one last soft note, the song ended. The girl slowly lifted her hands off the keys and placed them on her lap. She didn't stand yet. She just sat there, quietly, while the hall stayed frozen. Then, like a wave crashing on the shore, the silence broke. People stood up all at once. The clapping started small, then grew louder and louder until the entire hall echoed with applause. Some shouted "Bravo," while others wiped their eyes. Even the judges stood up and clapped. The blind girl smiled gently and stood, holding her cane. She gave a small bow and walked off stage, guided by the same helper. But even after she left the stage, the sound of her music stayed in the air. No, one could forget it, especially not the proud pianist. The applause still echoed across the hall even after the blind girl had walked off stage. People continued clapping longer than they had for any other performer. It wasn't the kind of applause that came from politeness. It came from something deeper, something honest. Backstage, the girl stood quietly near the curtain, breathing slowly. Her mother rushed to her side and hugged her tightly. "You did it," her mother whispered. "You really did it." The girl nodded and smiled. I could feel it. They were listening, and it was true. Every person in that hall had been touched by her music in a way they hadn't expected. For a few minutes, she had pulled them into a different world, a world where sound painted pictures more powerful than sight ever could. Even some of the staff, who had heard hundreds of performers before, were speechless. One man near the curtains wiped his eyes quickly and looked away, pretending it was just dust. Back in the audience, people were still whispering. "That was amazing," one person said. "She played like the piano was a part of her." Another said, "I've never heard anything like that before." One judge, who had not shown much emotion all day, leaned over to his fellow judge and said, "That wasn't just a performance. That was a message." But the proud pianist, who had performed just before her, sat frozen in his seat. His arms were still crossed, but now his face looked different. His confident smile was gone. His eyes stared at the empty stage. He had thought. He had given the best performance of the day. He had played fast, clean, and loud. People had clapped, yes, but not like this. Not with this much emotion. He didn't understand how she had done it. She hadn't used sheet music. She hadn't even looked at the keys. Yet her playing had reached people in a way his never had. A few of his friends sitting near him looked at him, unsure what to say. One of them mumbled, "She was really good." He didn't reply. Something inside him had shifted. He couldn't admit it out loud, but a small voice in his heart whispered something he didn't like to hear. "You judged her. You made fun of her, but she beat you without a word." Backstage, other contestants now looked at the blind girl with new eyes. A few came up to her and said kind things. One boy said, "That was the best part of the whole show." Another girl added, "You inspired me. Thank you."
Ow.
The blind girl stayed humble. She smiled and said thank you to each person. She wasn't proud or loud. She didn't brag. She didn't mention the mocking words from earlier. She didn't need to. Her music had already said everything. The proud pianist finally stood up and walked out of the hall. He didn't speak to anyone. His footsteps were heavy. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the best. Backstage, someone announced that the final scores would be shared soon. Contestants were asked to come to the main hall again. The blind girl took her mother's hand and began walking back. She moved slowly, but there was peace in her steps. People made space for her without being asked. Even the staff gently guided her to a special seat. Everyone waited. No one knew who would win. But many already knew who had won their hearts. And somewhere, even the proud pianist felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: respect. It's not just for her music, but for her silence, her strength, and the way she had let her playing speak louder than any words ever could. The audience had settled back into their seats. The final performance was over, and now everyone waited for the results. People spoke in soft voices, still thinking about the blind girl's playing. Her music had left a mark on the room that hadn't faded yet. Even the air felt different, calmer, softer. The judges sat at their long table, heads close together, speaking quietly as they looked through their notes. They had watched dozens of talented performers, each with skill and practice. But one performance stood out, not because it was the most perfect, but because it was the most real. Backstage, the blind girl sat beside her mother. She wasn't nervous. her fingers rested gently on her lap. She had done what she came to do. Whether she won or not didn't matter to her anymore. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you, not because you played well, but because you stayed true to yourself." The girl smiled. That's all I wanted. The proud pianist sat a few rows behind the judges. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had moved so fast over the keys. For the first time, he felt unsure about them. He had practiced so many hours, played perfect notes, and yet no one had clapped for him the way they did for her. His eyes looked toward the front where the blind girl now sat, calm and quiet. He remembered every word he had said about her, every joke, every time he laughed behind her back. And now, all of it felt heavy on his chest. A staff member walked up to the microphone on stage. The room went quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "thank you all for joining us today. We've heard incredible talent from every performer, and the judges were truly impressed." He paused for a moment and looked down at the card in his hand. "Now, we will announce the winners." Everyone leaned forward. The proud pianist took a breath and sat up straighter. The blind girl didn't move. In third place is into someone. Its way forward is into someone else. The proud Board is the proud pianist took a breath end with end up you. The better dot word. It's sippin with scented, but so to wellers and well and venner weld. The announcer read the name of a young boy who had played a complex piece with great speed. The crowd clapped in second place. The announcer called a girl who had performed with beautiful expression and soft notes. More clapping followed. Then came a longer pause. "And now, the special award," the announcer said. His voice softer now, for the performance that touched every heart in this room. This award is not just for skill, but for soul, emotion, and courage. People already knew what name was coming. Some were already clapping softly. This award goes to contestant number 17. The hall filled with applause again, louder than before. People stood up. Some wiped their eyes. Some simply smiled with full hearts. The judges stood too, clapping with real feeling. The blind girl looked surprised. She had expected nothing. She stood slowly, her mother helping her up. A staff member came to guide her gently to the stage. Her steps were steady, calm, full of quiet grace. When she reached the center, she didn't wave or pose. She just gave a small, simple bow. The applause didn't stop. In the audience, the proud pianist stood too. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He clapped not to fit in, but to show that he understood now. He'd seen something special. He'd heard something more powerful than any fast song. For the first time in his life, he realized, music was not just about how fast you play or how perfect you sound. It was about feeling. It's about touching hearts. And the blind girl had done exactly that. The blind girl stood on the stage, holding the award in her hands. It wasn't heavy, but it felt important. Not because of the trophy itself, but because of what it meant. It meant people had listened. It meant her music had reached their hearts, as the applause slowly died down. The announcer stepped back to let her speak if she wished. A small microphone was placed near her, and the hall went quiet once again. She didn't speak for long. She simply said, "I may not see like you do, but I feel music. And today, I'm thankful you felt it with me." That was all. Just one simple sentence. But it was enough. The room clapped again, not as loud this time, but warmer, like a quiet thank you from hundreds of people at once. She stepped off the stage, guided gently by a helper. Her mother waited near the stairs and hugged her tightly. "You did it?" she whispered, her voice full of pride. "I just played," the girl replied softly, but even she knew it was more than that. Her music had done something no speech or argument could. It had changed people. opened their minds, taught them to look beyond what their eyes could see. As the crowd slowly left the hall, people still talked about her performance, not just because she was blind, but because she had played with so much feeling, so much heart. Some said it was the most powerful moment they had ever witnessed in a music competition. Backstage, the proud pianist stood alone for a few minutes. His hands were still, no longer curled in pride. He looked at the ground, deep in thought. Then slowly, he walked toward her. She was sitting with her mother, resting quietly, holding the award on her lap. He stopped a few steps away. He didn't know what to say at first. But then he spoke, not loudly, not with pride, but softly and honestly. "I was wrong about you." She turned her head slightly in his direction. "It's okay," she said gently. "No," he continued. "I said things I shouldn't have. I thought music was about speed and perfection, but you showed me it's about something else." She smiled. "Music is about what you can't see. It's about what you feel." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for the lesson." There was no anger in her, no bitterness, only kindness. In that moment, he felt smaller, but not in a bad way. He felt humbled, and he knew he had grown. From that day on, he practiced differently. He didn't just chase fast notes or fancy pieces. He listened more, felt more. And though he didn't say it out loud, he always remembered the girl who taught him what real music sounded like, the blind girl. On the other hand, went back to her simple life. She didn't chase fame or big concerts. She played for those who needed comfort, in small rooms, in quiet spaces, for children, for elders, for anyone who wanted to listen with their heart. Years later, people still remembered that competition. They didn't always remember who won second or third, but they remembered her, the girl who played with no eyes, but with more vision than anyone else. And maybe that was the most powerful part of all. Not that she won a prize, but that she changed the way people saw the world through music, through silence, through soul, in that quiet moment on stage. When the hall went still and her music filled the air, was remembered not just as a performance, but as a reminder of what it truly means to be human.